My name is Damien Barrett. I am a Macintosh systems administrator at the Montclair Kimberly Academy in northern New Jersey. I've been there for about 11 years. And this is a project that goes back more than 5 years. We've been working on this project in our classrooms. How many of you have this problem in your classrooms? Show of hands. Yeah? Okay, those of you who have your hands down, put them up. Who has this problem in the classroom? I should see all hands up, right? Huge problem, everyone has it. It's super annoying. I can't tell you the number of times I had to go around and clean this mess up. And then you clean it up and it's back the way like this the next day or 2 days later. Or this problem, right? If I push it in hard, it'll go, right? Okay. Or this problem with the boxes being kicked and banged against boxes, right? Looks like my classroom, right? All classrooms are the same. Okay. Or this, which leads to this kind of problem, right? You get a call like, the screen's all fuzzy. I'm trying to show a movie and the screen's all fuzzy. And you go down there and you discover this, right? Or similar. Problem 2. So we have legacy tech, cabling, VGA, DVI, loose ports, bad cabling. Problem 2, Apple has taken away our optical drives, right? Apple doesn't sell a machine now that has an optical drive built in. Thanks. Maybe, right? Don't know. But teachers are like, I have thousands of DVDs, I have hundreds in my classroom, and I want to show them. And you mean to tell me I have to come check out an optical drive every time I want to show a disc in my class? VHS is already dead, right? When was the last time you guys played a VHS tape? 6 months? A year? 5 years? Right? Some do, right? So VHS is a dead technology or very rapidly dying. I'm of the opinion DVDs are to follow suit very quickly. Okay? So we're working with old legacy tech. And it's best, in my opinion, that we try to future-proof our classrooms going forward to kind of do away with this. Problem number 3, copyright. Now, technically, right, you're not supposed to show a film in your classroom because technically, by the technical letter of the law, you're breaking the law by showing it to an audience. However, there's all kinds of, we'll talk about this later on, there's all kinds of fair use clauses that allow you to do it. We're going to talk about copyright in quite a bit of detail later on in the session, but I want to put that up there as problem number 3 that we solve using Plex in the classroom. So we devised a solution. We saw this coming. We got tired of the cables being jacked. We said we need to figure out a way to get this content into the teacher's hands without DVD discs, without cabling, and make it as easy to use as possible so that they get on board playing the video files. Out with the old. Who has combo ducts like in the classroom, right? Who's had a hard time finding replacements? Because there's only one company in the world still making these things. Okay. So out with the old, in with the new. We went around and replaced all of our in-focus projectors with Epson projectors that have dual HDMI ports. The first HDMI port runs around to an Apple TV. Second HDMI port runs around a cable up to the ceiling down to the junction box, where then we have another a cable that runs out to a laptop, if necessary. We decided to put a digital playback solution in every classroom. So we had to devise, like, what's our best playout device? Well, we're an all Apple shop. We have been for a really long time. And so we could have gone the route of Roku or Chrome or Fire Stick or Netgear, right? But we decided to put Apple TVs in place. And for years, we put Apple TV 3s in place. And 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't have the Plex app on the Apple TV 3 to play the content out. And so we used a solution called Plex Connect that redirected the traffic from like the Apple Trailers channel to my own local Plex media server. And then recently we replaced all of our Apple TV 3s with 4s, and we'll talk about that change in a little bit. So we chose Apple TVs. We put one in every classroom. We pointed them all back to a Plex media server, all for less than $100,000. Right? The most expensive piece of which was the projectors. But the projectors were able to be put under a facilities budget rather than from the technology budget. So it was a different pool of money for us. Okay. So not a super expensive, when you take the projectors out of it, not a super expensive solution. Okay, Damien, great, but how? How do we play digitized school-owned content, DVDs and VHS tapes, on an Apple TV in a classroom that's connected to a projector? All right, what's missing from that? There's no laptop in that equation, right? You're not plugging a cable in here. Teacher's not taking a cable and plugging it into the machine. The teacher's not taking a disk and putting it in an optical disk drive and then plugging a cable in and trying to mirror it up to the projector. How do we do it? The solution is Plex. Raise your hand if you know what Plex is. Raise your hand if you're running Plex at home. Okay, good. Because this is where it started for me too. Now, it actually started for me back with XBMC, which is Xbox Media Center. It's an open source product that was a solution that was written by engineers 10, 12 years ago that ran a media center on top of the Xbox. And it became fairly popular. It got forked a number of times. That project is now called Kodi, K-O-D-I. The people who developed Plex forked XBMC into their own product because it's open source. And they released a product called Plex Media Server that's been around for 5 or 6 years now, maybe a little bit longer. And this is the solution that I landed upon to stream my content out to the Apple TVs in the classrooms. Here's Plex's diagram of how it works. Now, Plex likes to say that they're a media center, not just movies, but also television shows, photos, music. And so if you're running this at home, you could take all your music, take it out of iTunes, put it in Plex Media Center and play your music. Put your home movies in there, television shows, movies. Now, for my solution at my school, we're using only the movie functionality of this Plex Media Server. Plex now has an app for the Apple TV 4. It is finally, as of tvOS 12, available on the Apple Store and via VPP or DEP. So you can go and push this Plex app out to your Apple TV 4s just like you do an iPad app using your MDM server. And I use Jamf. There's others out there as well. Any MDM server that can push out VPP content can purchase Plex and push it to your Apple TVs. Okay. I was very excited when this finally happened. tvOS 12. I want to say it was November. Because prior to that, I was going and manually installing Plex app on every single Apple TV. Yeah, not fun. So this is a quick little interface video, shows you the Plex interface playing a movie. Okay. So teacher walks up, they have the remote, they find the Plex app, they launch it. It goes right to my upper school Plex media server. You'll see I have categories there: performing arts, health, history, MK productions. Okay. This is just a quick show you how you can scan the library. Let's go back to theater released movies. Okay. Some of this interface is customizable within the Plex app. You can remove recently added if you want. Okay, let's go over to the library itself. We're going to scroll down to Aladdin.
Is it config? Can you push out the config, or you have to config each one?
We'll do the Q&A at the end. Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is the playback of the movie starting, all without any disc, no cables. Teacher's just using the Apple TV remote in the classroom. Click, 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 click. Okay, you can scrub if you want, back and forth.
Welcome to Agrabah, city of mystery. Of enchantment. The
You
finest
can
version.
advance by chapter. Chapter markers are captured when you hit the DVD.
Raja, but I can't.
All right. And you'll notice that it also picks up all kinds of metadata, which we'll talk about in a little bit later on. Like, where's all this metadata coming from? Movie reviews, and ratings, and descriptions, and cast. Okay. All right. There is support in Plex for subtitles. So this is a video showing you how subtitles work. Okay, you go into Settings, under Audio, Subtitles. There's English and Spanish. We'll select Spanish. We'll go back to Play. And now this film should play with Spanish subtitle track. Again, we'll advance forward. I seem to like chapter 5, so we'll go to chapter 5.
Two years had passed since my mother
Now
was
we have the
taken away.
English audio with Spanish
My father
subtitles.
lost hope.
Okay, you can switch it around. Go back to Settings. Let's make the subtitles English instead. Go back and hit Play. And now we'll resume it from where we left off. And now it should play with
But he kept working to
English
take care of me
subtitles.
and Irene.
And you can switch that around. So this is especially useful in the foreign language classrooms where you might want a teacher switching back and forth between English and French or English and Spanish, and as well as different audio tracks, which we'll talk about next. So there's also support for audio tracks, which is like an English track or a Spanish track or a French track. So we'll open up this movie Coco. There's a number of audio tracks right there. We'll select the Spanish audio track. And now when we play this video out, it won't have the default English audio track, it'll have the Spanish audio track. We'll advance forward a little bit.
El Día de Muertos ya
And there's a Spanish audio track with English
Tenemos que
subtitles.
celebrar el camino, los pétalos guían a los ancestros a casa.
Some files allow you to switch them right here in this interface. This one doesn't, so you have to go back to the settings. And you can switch it around. Let's make it English. So we're going to switch the audio track to English. And we'll make the subtitles Spanish. So we're just kind of flipping it.
Mama, where should we put this table?
And then we have an English audio track with a
You want it
Spanish
down by the-
subtitle.
Get under!
Miguel?
Nothing?
All right. So that can be very useful in your foreign language classrooms for teachers who want to switch around audio tracks, subtitle tracks, particularly in the younger grades where they're just learning the language. Also in the older grades, they might want reinforcement, seeing the words while they hear them. Okay. This is the Plex web app interface. This is how you manage the Plex media server. You do it via a web browser. And you'll see that I've got all kinds of metadata loaded for my video files in the history category. Okay, so that's great, Damien. That's awesome. You put your Apple TVs in every classroom, but I know my students. They're going to go and they're going to try to install YouTube, or they're going to log in with their own Apple ID and reset the Apple TV back to factory defaults. Right? They're going to monkey with it. So fortunately, there is a feature in iOS and tvOS called single app mode. That when it's installed, when it's configured in your MDM for this device, what happens is when the Apple TV boots up, it immediately goes to the app that you tell it to go into single use mode. So in this case, I set Plex to be the single app mode app, and then that Plex app lives at the front, and you can't exit it. And so the teachers and students never see all of the icons with the settings. They never see like what's currently playing. They don't see the stuff Apple wants you to buy because it's currently available. All they see is the Plex interface. So that's great, but there's a caveat with this. And it has to do with the Apple TV 4 versus the Apple TV 4K. So we use all Apple TV 4s in our environment. We don't have any 4Ks. And I'm not sure we'll ever go to a 4K for one reason. If an Apple TV in single app mode loses its communication with the MDM server, that Apple TV, you're stuck in the Plex app. You can never exit out. You can't reset it. You're just stuck. With an Apple TV 4, which has a USB port on the back, I can plug in micro USB-C to my laptop, and I can reset it using Configurator 2. The Apple TV 4K does not have a USB-C port, or a micro USB port. So if you have an Apple TV 4 in single app mode, and that Apple TV loses its communication with the MDM server for whatever reason, maybe your MDM server failed and you had to rebuild it, and now it has a different identity, and the 4K can't communicate with it anymore because it doesn't exist. That 4K Apple TV is bricked. There's no way to reset it. No way that I found. If you know of a way to reset an Apple TV 4K in single app mode, let me know, because I haven't found it yet. I encourage you to submit that feedback to Apple. And whatever the next rev of the Apple TV 4K is, please give us the port back, because some of us are using these devices out deployed in single app mode, and we can't risk bricking them just by putting them in that mode. All right? That's great, Damien, but how do you do all this, right? It's great to show you how it all works. It's great to show you the interface, but how do I actually get there? What do I do? What steps do I take? This right here is your number one problem. Digitizing DVDs takes a long time. The more DVDs you have, the longer it takes. If you've only got 100 or 200, you're fine. If you have 1,000 or 2,000 or more, prepare for a long haul. It just takes a lot of time. Most of our discs, and we're upwards of 2,200 now, most of our discs were done by students over the summer, working for us for just whatever, like a little bit above minimum wage. And they got to experience the whole process of how do I digitize a DVD and how do I build the metadata and add it to the server. And then as the years have gone on, as 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019 go on, I've been digitizing discs as they come to me from teachers. Here's the tools that I use to do it. Mac DVD Ripper Pro. I think it's like $30. It's not very expensive. Pretty good app. It'll take your disk, it'll break the copyright encryption on it, and then make a digital stream file, an MP4 file of that disk. Make MKV. Currently it's in beta. It's actually been in beta for a couple of years now. It's not out of beta yet, but I think it will be soon. So while it's in beta, it's free. I think eventually the developer will ask money for it, but I don't think it'll be very much. And this is a program that will also digitize your disk, but the output is MKV instead of MP4. And we'll talk about container formats in a little bit. Handbrake, everyone's favorite. Handbrake is also both a DVD digitizer or ripper. It's also a transcoder, which means you can transcode from one video format to another video format. You can transcode from MKV to MP4, AVI to MP4, MP4 to straight DV stream if you want. Okay. A couple of words about video containers and file formats. I've kind of gone back and forth on this over the years. Initially, when I first started this project 5 or 6 years ago, I was all about MP4. MP4 is what's supported by Apple. It's what the Apple TV likes. Apple has built-in buffering technology in AirPlay and in the Apple TV to allow MP4s to be streamed flawlessly. An MP4 is not a container format, which means that it's an MP4 video file, and then if you have support files like audio tracks or subtitle files, those files need to live outside of the MP4. An MKV file, or a Metrosky file, is a container file format, which means that you can have an MP4 stream inside of it and supporting files, including audio tracks and subtitle files. And so for this reason, MKV has become quite a bit more popular file format in the streaming world. Okay. Fortunately for us, relatively recently, Plex has written code in their app that allows you to do a direct play of MKV files. For years, it was always, oh, here's my MKV file on the server. I need to play it on an Apple TV. The server wanted to transcode that file, convert it, before it played out on the Apple TV. And so you see these pictures of these guys running Plex media servers, and they've got like crazy, super high-end, like super powerful servers just to transcode the files. And I was kind of chuckled because I'm like, I just do all the transcoding before the file gets put on my server, and then it just streams MP4 flawlessly with no transcoding needed. So we'll see what happens as more people start to use the direct play, which basically it's a new feature in Plex. It works fairly well, but I've seen it kind of glitch here and there, but it's brand new. And it allows for the direct play of an MKV file without transcoding. By the way, my Plex media servers are Mac Minis. They're not expensive, okay, and not super fast. I think they're 2014 Mac Minis. Okay. Here's a quick video of MKV, make MKV digitizing a disk and making a file. Okay, we select the drive. It scans it, looking for the VOBs. I know I'm not going to let this thing sit here. It would normally take about half an hour. We're not going to sit here for half an hour and watch this thing transcode. I snipped it off. But here's the results of the scan. You'll see it shows on the left there a number of files, the video files on the server. On the disk. And the one we want is the main video file, the movie. All those other ones, the smaller ones, are like extras on the DVD. Commentary from directors, preview files, the FBI copyright notice, right? This is one of those files. Okay. And so we're going to select just the 4 gig one, and we're going to say yes, and it's going to start ripping it. Okay. And then the output on that, you'll see right there, is promnightmississippi.mkv. Okay. So then we take that file, and we drop it on the Plex media server, and then it's added for streaming. And we'll talk about metadata in just a little bit. Okay, what about VHS content? How do we digitize that? So I use a product called VidBox. Now there's a number of them out there. There's probably 10 or 12 of these out there, companies that make this. Elgato makes one. I've used a few of them. This is the one I settled on because it was $30 or $40. It was almost nothing. And it works really well for me for digitizing VHS content. Here's how it works. Use composite cables, your red, yellow, and white cables. Plug those into the output on the VHS player. Plug the other end into the VidBox controller. And then there's a USB cable that goes out to a computer running the VidBox software. And it's just a straight capture. 1-to-1. So if it's a 2-hour movie, it's going to take 2 hours to copy it or digitize it. Okay. Fortunately, our VHS collection is not that big, so we're not talking about crazy amounts of hours, but I want to say we have 100 to 150 VHS tapes in our collection. Here's my MacBook Air, probably I think it's a 2010 MacBook Air, okay, with the vid box on top of a VHS player. And here's the interface itself. Basically, you hit you hit play on the VHS player, you hit record, and it starts capturing it. Okay, and it outputs an MP4 file. So let's talk about Plex's naming and organizational structure. So Plex has all of this documented on their website. If you follow Plex's naming routines, it should be able to find any commercially available movie right from IMDb and scrape that data. So here what I've done is that disk I ripped earlier, I made a folder called Prom Night, Mississippi, and I grabbed my outputted MKV file and I dropped it in there. And once that's copied in there, because I've named the folder the name of the movie, Plex will automatically go out and find that disk, that metadata on IMDb, and populate it. So this is Plex's naming structure. And you'll see the difference there between the MKV and the MP4. The MKV is a container format, so you don't have to have the audio files and the SRT file as a subtitle file. You don't have to have those alongside of it. They're inside of the MKV. But if you name your movie folder the same name as the file, you should be able to find it. And that's all documented right there in that URL. So there it is, copied up. And the output is, if I go to my Plex server, I have to log in. The output on this, because I've named this folder correctly, if I go right to where it lives, theater release movies, and I scroll down to Prom Night, so P, you'll see that automatically it picked up all the metadata. See that? I didn't have to go out and type anything in. I didn't have to search for anything. And it pulled everything from IMDb. Cast, ratings, everything you could find on IMDb. All right. What about all those files that don't live in IMDb? What about those obscure documentaries that you have that need metadata, right? But they don't exist in IMDb, or they don't. But you know what it is. Like maybe you're even looking at the back of the thing, and you're like, what if I could just take that description, right, and type it in manually in my metadata? You can do that. So here I have a file, A0505030, right? Okay. I happen to know that it's called because I'm looking at the disk. It's called In Search of History, The Night Tulsa Burns. So I grab that text from the web. I go to the entries data point on the Plex Media server, and I paste it in. And then I go out and I find a cover art that I like. And I do a quick Google search for The Night Tulsa Burns DVD. I grab that cover art, and I paste it right in. So here's a quick video of doing that for a primary school video file. Now our primary school is a little bit different. They have a lot of like picture books, little cartoons that were made out of picture books. So I know that there's a picture book that we're looking for called All the Colors of the Earth. I do a search for it. I find the cover art of the book itself. I look for one that's decent high quality. I kind of like the second one over there. That's a nice one. I'm going to grab that file. I'm going to put it on my desktop. And you'll see it's named with whatever Google decides to name itself. And I'm going to rename that poster.jpg. So by renaming it poster.jpg, I'm telling Plex that this is the file I want to use for the cover art. And so if I put that in here, I drag it in, I assign it, and then I put that file in the correct location on the Plex media server, then what happens is if a scan fails or if I have to rebuild my library, I've got the local artwork already saved. So I go into picture books, I find where it lives. You'll see that I'm actually having trouble finding it here. So what I do is I go, it's not there. I'm like, where is it? Well, I know it's on the server. Right? It's not there. So I go back to the server, I get information on it, I go to info, and I see that it's in a folder called How Did Dinosaurs Say Goodnight? So then I go back to the file, the finder, and there it is. And I drag that poster file in there. So that if I have to do a library rebuild later on, I already have the local artwork saved. I don't have to go find it again. So that's super tedious, but you only have to do it once. Okay. Some tips on digitizing. Again, this ripping the DVDs is your biggest task. I wish there were an automated way to do it. I haven't seen anything. I haven't found anything. I know there are like services out there that'll do it for you, but I don't recommend it. You want to kind of have control over this stuff for copyright reasons, and I'll explain that in a little bit. When you're ripping a DVD, your optimal quality is about 25 frames per second. Now, everybody's organization is a little bit different. We don't necessarily need super high-end, high-res video files. We don't need like a straight rip of a Blu-ray. And so I can transcode those files to be smaller. By the way, a straight rip of a Blu-ray is like 25 to 40 gigs. If you're trying to stream a 25 gig file across your network, I don't care how good your network is, you're going to have a hard time. So everyone's organization is a little bit different. I found that the best file output is around about 1.5 to 2 gigs. Okay. And so that's my target when I'm transcoding or ripping. Make sure you have adequate backup of your file library and your Plex media server. This is my backup solution right here. Good old carbon copy cloner, right? I have a Mac Mini. I have 3 hard drives plugged into it. Drive A, Drive B, and Drive C. Drive A has all my media on it. Drive B is a clone of Drive A. It runs every night. Drive C is a clone of the Macintosh hard drive that has my Plex media library database on it, and the OS and everything else. And so if any time I have a hard drive failure, it's not hard for me to get back to where I was the night before because I have a clone of it every night. And I've configured Carbon Copy Cloner to email me in the case of a clone failure, so I can go look and find out what's going on. Simple. KASS, right? Simple, simple. Just recently also, it's not in the screenshot here, but we're also now backing these servers up to backup layers into the cloud as well. Because if your building burns down, all the clones in the world aren't going to help you. Okay. Backblaze, yeah. So we purchased an institutional copy of, or something with Backblaze, and we're now backing these servers up to Backblaze. Okay. I wish that I didn't have to talk about this, but I do. It is the 700-pound gorilla in the room. Copyright is a problem. Our technology has not kept up, or our legislation has not kept up with our technology. Period, end of story. And it probably never will. So we have to talk about copyright, and we have to talk about technically why we're not supposed to do this, but also why we can. It's a dilemma. You have rights holders who want to be paid for their content. You have rights holders who don't want that content distributed illegally. It's all fair and good. I get it. But we have classrooms where we want to be able to show the media to our students because it's educational. So fortunately, for quite a while now, we've had something called the Fair Use Doctrine. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but suffice it to say, in court multiple times, the Fair Use Doctrine has been held up, and it allows schools to show copyrighted material in a classroom for fair use. because you've purchased the media. You're just not playing it in the living room. You're playing it in the classroom. And that's been held up over and over and over again. There's something called the Teach Act that was passed in 2002 that further reinforces how these copyrighted material can be displayed in an environment, in a classroom, under fair use. And I've highlighted the kind of the key there. The purpose and nature of the use, including whether such use is of commercial nature, is for nonprofit and educational purposes. It's one of the reasons why I asked very early on here, how many of you are K-12 or higher ed? And almost every hand went up. Because if you're not K-12 or higher ed, this is a much different consequence. Right. The University of North Texas has a really nice blurb that I clicked out here. It's at the URL at the bottom. If you decide to do this and you go back to your school and you say, I'd like to do this project, take this information with you, because you're probably going to want to get do your due diligence and get your legal counsel to give you an okay. Because again, technically, by the very technical letter of the law, and again, I'm not a lawyer, when you digitize the disc, you're breaking copyright, technically. But fair use allows us to do it. Does that make sense? So with that, there's some caveats. Let's skip over that. That's just a little graphic I found that I thought was kind of humorous, because that's the truth, right? Now, this is changing as streaming becomes much more popular, as Blockbuster dies and as Family Video dies. Some guidelines and some caveats. It has to be internal use only. You are not allowed to stream this content over a WAN. It can only be on your LAN. So the question comes up, can my students go home and watch this video on their laptop at home? Not unless you have some kind of VPN set up for students who are then VPNing into your network. I can't stress that one enough, because that's actually outlined in the Teach Act. Also, there was a lawsuit in 2013 at the UCLA. UCLA was sued by the MPAA because they were streaming content to their MOOC. And they were sued because the copyright law was like, you're streaming this content over a WAN, over a MOOC. And it went to court, and it was dismissed by the judge because the judge says it was good, it was fair use doctrine allowed it. Okay. Ownership, what do I mean by that? You need to have a physical copy of every video file you're streaming. I'll say it again. You need to have a physical copy of every video file you're streaming. Your teachers cannot go to the public library and check out a disk and bring it in and hand it to you to digitize, and you put it on your server, and then they're like, I need that disk back so I can return it. Well, if you're returning it, then you don't own it, and you're not allowed to stream it. So you need to have a physical copy. You need to own a physical copy of every file you're streaming. Not generally a problem, but you have to educate your users about this. Gone are the days, I think, of bringing that disk in from the library, showing it, and then taking it back. Now, technically, that's illegal too, but that's the problem, right? Our laws haven't kept up with our technology. Okay. This is what our collection looks like. It's a mess. I hope to have it alphabetized this summer, but that may not happen. So we'll see. And like I said, we're over 2,000 videos now. And all of those shelves are double stacked. There's another row behind it. So I actually Bill, I need 3 more shelves. Okay. This is the reference I was talking about to the UCLA case, analog and DVD copies. Okay. And then there's something called public display licensing. This is outside the scope of this session, but as you progress forward, your lawyer, your counsel might say, hey, we're being told that we need to have a public display license to play these videos. Sort of. So if you want to go and read through these, it talks about the streaming licenses. It talks about if there's a streaming license available for a video you want to play, you need to have a copy of that license. The problem is those streaming licenses are very expensive. And so the fallback is, I have a physical copy, I'm going to digitize it, put it on my shelf, and now I'm good under fair use. So you can read through that. There's 2 different websites there. And then I'll make this slideshow available to you guys at the end of the week. I'm going to take out my silly hat joke and publicize it on the PSU website. And so you'll have access to all of these websites. Reference the work of others. This is another callback to the UCLA streaming case in 2013. Okay. And communicate. Don't do this in a vacuum. Talk to your end users, educate your end users, talk to your administration, talk to your legal counsel, get everybody on board, and then push forward. When I started the project in 2014, we actually had to pause for a couple of years, waiting for legal counsel to okay it. But I kept working in the background, getting everything set up, so that when our legal counsel finally okayed it, we were ready to go from day one. Boom. Okay, so you need to stay compliant. Here's a scenario. You have a health teacher you have a health department who wants to show a video to 4 health classes simultaneous at the same time. By the letter of the law, you need to have 4 copies of that disc on your shelf. I'll say it again. If you have a class that's showing the same video file at 4 times simultaneously, you need to have 4 copies of that disc. So how do you track that? There's a program called Tautulli. And this is an open source project. It's available on GitHub. It is a Python app that runs in parallel, in conjunction with your Plex media server. And it tracks what's been played, by which devices, and when. So here's an example of what server is this. Doesn't matter. This is one of our Plex media servers showing me which movies are being played, as well as when and by which user. This is middle school, because there's MS223 and MS208. Okay. As well as when it was started. And so you can watch for simultaneous tracking, simultaneous playback in your Tautulli setup. And then remedy that problem by going to purchase 2 or 3 more copies of the disc. Zoomed in a little bit. Okay. Some gotchas that we've learned. Your network backbone must be adequate. It's so important that I'll say it again. Your network has to be adequate. If you don't have a strong network, if your wireless is flaky, if your Ethernet switches are old, you're probably going to have a hard time. Streaming video is not for the faint of heart. It requires a lot of bandwidth. Now, having said that, I've had upwards of 10 simultaneous streams from one server and not had any problems on our network. So it's totally doable. Just talk to your network manager, find out what your network is like, and plan around that. Change is hard. People resist it automatically. At some point, we are going to take the combo decks out of our classrooms. We have not done it yet, but at some point we will. In the ensuing years until that happens, we've been training our users on how to use the Plex interface to play back video. Now, more and more of them are doing it because we're taking their discs away. Right? When they give me a disc, I digitize it, it goes on the shelf. And they don't have the disc anymore. And so it's kind of this gradual shift from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things. Now, I still have teachers bringing discs in, but the word's getting out slowly that they need to bring those discs to me, we digitize them, and they become available. Okay. And then that's wrapped around end user training. We have in our school, we have a program called the Laptop Leadership group. These are students that are trained by us to be like our front line of tech support in the classroom. And so they've all been trained in how to use Plex, and often they'll step forward and help the teacher who can't figure out how to make it work. And this is also something you can do during professional development or in service. Okay, that was a lot of information. I'll take any questions. Oh, hold on, wait. Sorry. Just 1 minute. I had to hold it longer.
Yep.
So can I put my library into the cloud?
Can you
Google Drive
put your library into the
cloud?
as long as that's a protected space, yeah. As long as you're not trying to stream from the cloud.
No.
Okay.
Just to avoid the physical
I would say for backup, yes. For streaming, like if you're trying to stream from Amazon.
No, not to stream, for backup.
Yes. For backup, yes.
And also to avoid the physical drives.
Yes, you probably, yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
For backup. Mhm, yeah. Okay.
Good throw. How do you handle user management?
Describe user management, like inside Plex
Are
or?
you setting up the Plex library with just the single administrative account and then allowing people to just leverage that account to access it? Or are you providing sharing users with sub-accounts off
No,
of it?
there's only one user in the Plex Media Server.
Okay.
And the only devices allowed to communicate with the Plex Media Server are the Apple TVs.
Okay.
So the web interface is protected, the users can't get to it. So even if they wanted to try to stream from their laptop via the web interface, they can't. They'd have to know the login, and they don't know the login. Okay.
You configure the Apple TVs one by one? Is that?
No, right now they're configured via. So, yes, Apple TVs have to be linked to the Plex Media Server, and so there's and it showed in here. There's when you set it up, when you launch Plex, it wants you to put in a code that links it to your Plex Media Server.
So you just do that manually?
Yeah.
Each one?
It's not hard, and every now and then I have to relink it, but it's not too hard to do. It's much less hard than actually going to install the app and then pointing to the server, and so. Catch box over here. Over there.
Damien and I work together. One of the things that was important to mention, what Damien explained, is we've wired all of our Apple TVs. So every Apple TV has a Ethernet run back to it. So we're not running. So what Damien was talking about, the network, this is not all going over our wireless network. We were very deliberate in doing that because we didn't want to saturate the wireless network with streaming video traffic, but allowing all of the traffic to go over the wire. The other thing with the single user mode, the single app mode, is that does not prohibit you from airplaying to the Apple TV from within the classroom. Because that was one of the reasons we're an all Mac shop, over 1,000 devices, so we went with the Apple TV really for that purpose, because any student can put their screen onto the Apple TV at any point, and it doesn't prohibit doing that either.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. I had forgotten to mention that AirPlay just goes right over the top of the Plex interface. And so the teacher walks into the classroom and it's Plex. They can still take their laptop and AirPlay their screen right over the top of it.
Will it be the conference room instruction at all?
Yeah, I haven't tried that.
Every one of ours, when you go into that, prompts a code on the screen, so you have to enter that code in the screen. You're not going to be, one of the concerns we had with it was, a student in one classroom popping their screen up on another one. You have to be in the space to actually see the code in order to connect to that Apple TV.
But you don't have the conference room?
No, we don't have
No,
the
we
conference room. No, that we don't have on there.
I haven't tested that. I'd be interested to know. I don't know how Plex interacts with conference room mode. I just haven't tested it. I haven't had need to, so.
Two questions. One, simultaneous users playing the same file.
I'm sure that's education up front, like, hey, we have to coordinate.
Yes.
There's no way to stop that on the back end?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
And so, again, I think it all comes down to if you're ever challenged in court, it's have you done your best effort to remain compliant?
Because I'm assuming whether the logs from the app,
Tautulli.
thank you, those would be something we would have to present as well as.
Correct. And so those are it's all logs. There's logs there that you can present as evidence if need be. Now, the likelihood of that happening is very, very, very low. But look, right? We're an affluent school, and we live in a litigious society. So we do our best effort to stay compliant.
And then just make sure to buy it after the fact.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you discover that there is a simultaneous stream happening, make sure you have enough copies, and if you don't, buy them after the fact.
And then the second, Plex database, versus the Plex library. Have you found any good ratios? So I noticed you had chapter images, and at least from personal use, that can take up a pretty fair amount of space.
It can. Right now, I actually have 3 Plex libraries. I have 1 per campus: upper school, middle school, primary school.
So each one has their own.
Yeah. So each one has their own Plex media server with their own Plex library. Last time I checked the largest one, it was about 10 gigs, which isn't huge.
And about 2,000.
Well, that one is on that. It's 2,200 across all 3 campuses.
Okay.
I want to say the largest library was like 850 or 900 discs, movies.
And then the database, a couple gigs or.
Yeah, the largest I saw was about 10. I haven't looked at the backups in a while because remember that Plex backs up that database automatically, so you can go in and see the backups if you want. I just haven't looked in a while, but I remember seeing it was about 10 gigs. So not crazy huge, and it backs up, I don't know, 30 minutes overnight. So, behind you.
I was just curious how big the drives are that you use.
Yep, so I have 3 4 terabyte hard drives plugged into each Mac Mini. Drive A, Drive B, and Drive C. And right now, on my largest media collection, I think I've used 1.5 terabytes. And so I'm not even halfway there yet. And if I ever outstrip that, I'll just replace it with a bigger hard drive. Clone it from the small one to the big one, and name it the same, and because the absolute path is the same, Plex picks it right up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
How about the remotes?
The Apple TV remotes? Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. And this is a personal comment. I personally detest the Apple TV 4 remote. I hate it. It's terrible. And the thought of me having to keep all of those remotes charged in the classrooms was, ugh. So what we did, we discovered that the silver Apple TV 3 remote works just fine with an Apple TV 4. Now, you miss the scrubbing that I hate anyway, but it works fine. And those are $20 a piece. If a teacher drops an Apple TV 4 remote and the screen breaks, that's $75 to replace. So we just purchased a $20 silver remote for every classroom. The white ones also work, yeah. And so, and that's worked out really well. Because it also didn't, as we kind of moved toward teachers have had the silver remote in the classroom for years, and so they're used to it. So it was one less thing we had to teach them. It's the different Apple TV, same remote. If you decide to go with the Apple TV 4 remotes, I've seen some pretty clever solutions out there for managing them. People put sticky magnets on the back, and then they can stick it right to the whiteboard. And it just stays right attached to the whiteboard, because whiteboards are magnetic usually. So I've seen that done. I've seen like little silver pen trays that have suction cups on them, and they stick to the board, and the remote sits right in the tray. So it's front and center all the time. Okay. Question over here? Box. Can you pass the catch box over there? Okay.
All right, two questions. First, do you have someone assigned to actually go through those logs regularly to make sure there's no dupes?
It's me. It's me, yeah.
It seems relatively tedious.
It is, yeah. And I'll be honest, I don't do it every day, but I check periodically.
But it doesn't say concurrent use or anything like that?
I look for duplicate, like, timestamps.
Okay.
It's chronological. And so in this scenario I talked about where you've got 4 classrooms all playing at the same time, it's pretty easy to see a cluster of times all within a minute or two of each other. And that you also see like the same video file being played. And so it's pretty easy to see as you look at the log, like, oh, there's 4 right there, all the same name, and they're all within 3 or 4 minutes of each other. Okay, well, there's an example of a simultaneous play. So it's...
We've had those conversations with the health department.
Yep.
About the fact that, we've got 2 health departments we need to show at the same time. We need to have 2 copies of why we have 1 file. We need to have 2 copies of
So I'll repeat that for the microphone. We've had those conversations with the health department about, because for whatever reason they seem to be the department doing it, about buying multiple copies. And it's for compliance reasons, and they haven't complained. They just, oh, we didn't know we had to do that. And so we go and we buy them, we put them on the shelf, and we move forward.
The other question is about digitizing. Is there any legality difference between downloading videos from the internet if you own the media anyway versus doing it by hand?
I don't have an answer for that. I know what you're saying. Like, look, I have this disc right in front of me, and oh, look, there it is up there. I'll just go grab that copy. I don't know.
Would seem faster.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that. Again, because I'm not a lawyer. So maybe. I wouldn't do it. I would definitely digitize your own copy, because then you have complete control over the widget. Like, because what happens then if you grab that file that you think is correct, but it's not? Turns out that it's a different version, or it's an edited version, or it's the wrong movie, or somebody has spliced in some other video in the middle of it. You just don't know. Catchbox over here.
Could you talk just a little bit about what because I know you've been processing this for a number of years, kind of what's faculty adoption look like, how you went about, conversing with those who had been stuck in older ways of this process, and what that looked like and what pitfalls there were in that process to adoption?
Sure. It's a great question. Thank you. And I'll be perfectly honest that we're not 100% yet. We're not even close. However, every year it gets a little bit better. And it's going to be a long process of attrition where as some of our, and I'll just be blunt, as some of our older faculty go away through attrition, newer faculty come on who are more comfortable with technology, and they seem to be much more ready to adopt it than some of our people who've been there for 20 or 30 years. And that's just kind of a statement of the nature of things. We're not 100%. We probably won't be 100% digital until we pull the combo decks out of the classrooms. I don't know when that's going to happen. Maybe next summer, maybe 2 summers away. We don't really know yet, but at some point we will. But we have to make sure before we do that we've done enough training in service, in professional development. At the end of the school year in June every year, we have something called Tech Institute, where we do professional development training with our users. And we've done a little bit of training around Plex with there, as well as our in-service in August when they come back at the end of the summer. So I headed up here. Change is hard. People resist it. However, I'll go back to what I started with. VHS and DVDs they're a dying technology. Everything is going streaming. And we didn't even talk in here about Netflix and Hulu and the legality of using a Netflix account in a classroom. Like, that's a whole different topic that's not germane to what this session is about. For instance, there is no way as yet for your school to get a Netflix account legally. Like, that doesn't exist. If you go to Netflix and say, hey, we want to pay you money so that we can legally stream your content in our classroom, Netflix has no answer for you. Same with Hulu, same with Apple. Same with Amazon. Because our legislation hasn't caught up to our technology. And I think eventually it will, but we're not there yet. So that's actually, and streaming services are outside the scope of this, but that's just a quick point to tell you that we're not there yet. And so what we do in our environment is we don't allow it. Teachers say, can I use Netflix to play this content in my classroom? And 99 times out of 100, we say no. Cash box to Bill.
So the thing with the Netflix is also it's an equity issue. Because if we can't do it for everyone, we don't open it up for individual teachers who even want to use their own. Because then if, it's a matter of then, oh, well, if you both teach the same course and I don't have a Netflix account or a Hulu account, well, I need to use your account. Well, that's my personal account. I don't want you using it. So there's the legal issues, there's the equity issues, it's a hornet's nest. We block it at the network level.
Right. Yeah, it's a much grayer area at universities. Yeah. Catch box over here.
You mentioned 3 different servers which are in physical buildings separately, I'm assuming. Have you looked at, or is there any thought you've given to load balancing? You mentioned 10 streams simultaneously. In my high school alone, I could see 10 streams happening if I had a good adoption rate, just with my SPED classrooms, not to mention any other social
So you
studies.
you're bigger than we are, it sounds like. How many
Like
students?
80 classrooms in the high school.
Okay.
Elementary schools will be fine.
So you might want to look at a load balancer. Maybe have 2 servers and they're load balancing.
How does that work with the code and Plex and tying
know.
the Apple TVs?
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, so you haven't,
Yeah.
all right.
I don't.
I was just curious if you.
I know that it
thought.
exists. I've seen on the Plex forums and the Plex groups, people are talking about load balancing all the time. I haven't played around with it. I just don't know. You might want to look at a more powerful server than a Mac Mini for that reason. But I still think your bottleneck might be network more than processor. So.
Just to comment on that, one thing that you could consider is pointing multiple Plex servers back at a central storage device. And it does work well with NASs and that type of stuff. So that would be one of the first things that I would be looking at.
That's a good idea.
I've run a Plex server myself a long time at home, but haven't looked at this scale for the school.
I'm actually a little surprised that we haven't seen a more robust commercial solution yet for this. Something that competes with Plex. There's one out there called MB that is starting to become popular, but nothing commercial. I'm a little surprised that Blackbot or somebody hasn't stepped in and built something.
Legal gray area.
It might be. It could be that it's too legally questionable for them to play with. It's hard to say though. Up here.
I don't know either.
Yeah. Good catch.
In your research, did you guys ever look at a service like Canopy? And could that maybe serve a need in the Netflix streaming?
Yeah, quite a number of years ago, we looked at Canopy for photo management, but I've never looked at it for movie management or video file management.
I know in the education, for some education for libraries, it's been a really good.
I don't have a lot of experience with that.
Really deep, I guess.
We have Canopy. It's not used.
It's not you. Teachers aren't using it. Yeah.
Staff, teachers will literally come down, grab a DVD, grab a external DVD drive, if a USB-C adapter if needed, if they have a Mac, take all those things back to their classroom and show a movie because they will not use Canopy. Part of it goes back to attrition and a generation who does not like to use a different service than what they're used to, but that is a minority in my experience at our school. For whatever reason, it may be the content is not what they're looking for. It might be that the teachers specifically have their curriculum focused on particular movies and it hasn't changed or, changed only moderately and still use the same movie from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or a newer version of those films. But Canopy has very, very little usage. We're considering potentially just dropping it completely. Yeah.
So if you're looking to get started with Plex, it is free. It doesn't cost anything. It's an open source product. They do have Plex Pass subscriptions you pay for. but they give you extra features. But if you just want to start playing around with Plex, you can install it on any spare box you have, and just to see how it works. And take a couple video files, take a couple DVDs and digitize them, drop them in there, start playing around with it, and then decide, is this a project I want to push forward on or not? Now for me, it started at home. My 2-year-old son was chewing on all of my DVDs because he was teething, right? So I still have all these DVD covers with teeth marks in them. And I'm like, well, I need to get these things out of his hands. How can I make this all these digital? And so I started looking at XBMC and then moved into Plex. So for me, it started at home as kind of a solution for me. And then 5 or 6 years ago, I said, how can I make this work at school? And how can I make it work in the educational services? And started the project. And it's been fairly successful. Like I said, we're never going to have 100% buy-in, but we're getting there. I've discovered that as I train more and more teachers, they see how much easier it is to use, and then they start using it. So it's getting them over that initial hump, breaking that old habit. Any other questions? All right. So please give me feedback. I love feedback, good, bad, otherwise. You can submit questions to me. I have another slide here with my email address on at the end. Email me questions. Happy to answer however I can, or point you in the direction of somebody who can. I found some of the most useful Plex resources are actually like the Facebook Plex groups. There's all kinds of people out there that are way more into it than I am, and I'm pretty into it because that's who they are. There's Plex forums that are pretty accurate. Their documentation is pretty good. So start playing around with it. So please submit feedback, and here's my contact information. All right, thank you very much.